Discover the amazing secrets to strengthen your mind. 7 Transformative Stoic Practices Revealed. Sarah dropped her keys onto the kitchen counter and hung her coat by the door, grateful for the warmth of her small home. But even as she settled in, a sense of weight pressed on her chest. Each mind-numbing shift at the hospital seemed to merge into the next. Another day, another series of relentless demands, while outside, rain fell relentlessly, drumming against the window like her own thoughts, harsh, repetitive, and unforgiving. The bright accolades of her former classmates echoed in her mind, their lives splashed across social media, glowing with prestige and success, research grants, accolades, promotions. Meanwhile, here she was, an unremarkable nurse navigating a small Midwestern town, often feeling the sharp sting of insignificance. What had she done to warrant her role tending to the sick and weary in an underfunded clinic? Each time she whispered to a patient, "You're not alone," the irony clawed at her insides. Who was she kidding? She paced the room, restless. The clatter of thunder rattled the house, and instinctively, she sought refuge in the attic. The familiar creak of stairs echoed her uncertainty as she climbed, the air musty and thick. There, among forgotten family heirlooms, her fingers brushed against the cool leather-bound surface of her late grandfather's journal, its spine worn but dignified. As she opened its pages, a faint smell of old paper filled her senses, and with it, an unexpected flood of memories washed over her, tinted with his voice, the very voice that had taught her to face each day with strength. "Adversity shapes character, Sarah," he would say, his faded expressions etched in her mind. In those haunting words lay a spark that propelled her forward. She could almost feel the stoicism seep into her heart, compelling her to embrace the day ahead. Incorporating his lessons into her routine, she gradually began to practice mindfulness, finding herself pausing to listen to David's laughter instead of letting frustrations consume her. Each moment she spent caring for her patients became a transformative experience, yet the looming dread of her reality could not be fully silenced. As Sarah settled into her newfound conviction, another storm began to stir. Whispers of corruption at a rival hospital reached her ears, their disregard for vulnerable patients igniting a fire within her. It was a truth that begged to be exposed, but with awareness came the weight of consequences. Would this put her career on the line? What would it mean for her reputation, her son? The thought of her colleagues turning their backs on her as they had before sent her heart racing. Just then, the tension in her chest flared as she recalled the sweet smiles of patients who had expressed gratitude for her care. She opened her mouth to speak those unvoiced fears, yet the words hesitated at the edge of her lips. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But the storm inside her surged once more, each pulse of anxiety threatening to drown her resolve. The implications of silence loomed like dread clouds overhead, a choice that could shatter her fragile equilibrium. Should she align with those in power, sacrificing her integrity, or risk everything for an unwavering voice for justice? It felt as though an invisible force held her still, as if the very walls of her home would collapse under the strain of her indecision. Suddenly, the lines between right and wrong blurred, and the shadows of impending choices deepened, wrapping her in uncertainty. As she stood at the crossroads of justice and fear, she knew the next step could lead her toward an abyss, or perhaps a path toward lighter skies and an undeniable change. The moment felt suspended in time as Sarah stood in her attic, the weighty journal cradled in her hands. Each passing second rattled her with the gravity of her decision. Should she speak up or stay silent? Her mind churned through scenarios, consequences cascading like thunder outside her window. With a quick determination, she tucked the journal under her arm and returned downstairs, the musty scent lingering as a reminder of her grandfather's wisdom. She retrieved her laptop from the kitchen table, ready to dig deeper into the corruption she had heard murmurings about. Fingers poised above the keyboard, she hesitated, wrestling with doubt. What if she was wrong? What if there was nothing but shadows behind those rumors? No more fear, she whispered to herself, recalling the strength that echoed from her grandfather's journal. The ink barely dried upon turning the pages beckoned her to take risks, thoughts crystallizing into action. She typed hospital corruption Midwestern town into the search bar and dug in, piecing together scraps of information that would expose the heart of deception. As she sifted through news articles and local blogs, revealing names and misdeeds, an anger ignited within her, burning away the weight of her previous doubts. Digging deeper, Sarah stumbled upon the name of an administrative official at the rival hospital, an individual whose reputation shone brightly on the surface but whose deeds bore darkness beneath. The more she investigated, the clearer her choices became. Clarity soon morphed into resolve. It wasn't merely about unearthing corruption, it was about holding herself accountable to her patients, her son, and her own sense of self-worth. For the first time in a long time, a current of purpose surged through her veins. She would not be a bystander. As the rain poured heavily outside, a wider storm brewed within her. She decided to connect with a journalist at the local newspaper, someone who had the means to give her findings a broader voice. The thought of reaching out sent a fresh pulse of anxiety coursing through her. It would be a calculated risk, one that made her heart race with equal parts fear and exhilaration. Sarah drafted an email, her fingers trembling slightly but confidence gaining ground with every word. As she composed her message, she forced herself to focus on the outcome, information that could enlighten the public, patients who needed to know the truth. With a deep breath, she hit send. The quiet beeping from her computer felt monumental, each second stretching as she anticipated a reply. The act of speaking out was no longer tethered to the fear of isolation, it was empowering her to embrace her truth. Just as she began to relax, her phone buzzed, a sudden invocation of worry. It was a message from her son, David, asking when she could be home. She could picture him, sitting on the floor with his sketches scattered around him. A wave of guilt washed over her. Why did the demands of her work weigh so heavily that they sometimes overshadowed the joy of being present for him? A fleeting moment of struggle passed as she remembered her grandfather's teachings, balance. She needed to reaffirm her commitment not only to her professional aspirations but to her family. The realization struck her, illuminating an area of her life that had been neglected. Finding balance would mean being mindful of pursuing change while also maintaining the foundations of her world. With determination pulsing like a heartbeat, she promised herself to allocate time to deepen her bond with David, even as she sought justice for her patients. But as the evening drew near, Sarah grappled with one undeniable fact: her days of silence were numbered. A text from the journalist came through just as she cleaned up for the night, his reply a fleeting confirmation that soon, the truth would surface. Her heart raced again, anxiety mixing with the thrill of imminent change. It was time to confront the establishment, but would it cost her more than she was willing to give? The darkness outside her window felt less foreboding now, but the echo of uncertainty still lingered. Sarah knew the next wave, the confrontation with the institution she had once considered untouchable, was closing in. Would she be ready to embrace the storm? As the day dawned, Sarah's mind buzzed with possibilities, a sleep-deprived whirlwind of thoughts woven with determination. She had sent the email, but the lack of immediate response gnawed at her. Did her findings resonate? Was the journalist even interested in exposing the truth? Pacing her kitchen, she could hear the coffee percolating, each bubbling sound a reminder that she had to keep moving forward. Sipping the freshly brewed coffee, she stared out the window, watching the world outside slowly awaken. Life was continuing, yet she felt stuck, torn between her professional aspirations and the emotional pull toward her son. Each sip gave her a moment to reflect, to contemplate where she had been and where she was determined to go. The path was uncertain and fraught with obstacles, but she could not afford to go back. With renewed purpose, Sarah sprawled her grandfather's journal on the table beside her laptop. Its pages contained the wisdom of someone who had fought countless personal battles. Flipping through sections, she skimmed lines that urged bravery, accountability, and the courage to seek justice. She paused at a passage that echoed the need to channel fear into fuel, a directive that reverberated in her core. The morning passed in a flurry of notes, ideas scribbled in a half-dazed state. She began drafting a list of her findings, concrete points that would guide her conversation with the journalist. The anonymous whistleblower within her gradually transformed into a competent, aspirational advocate for her hospital and the patients who depended on it. Then, a ping interrupted her thoughts. Her phone lit up with a message from the journalist. The anticipation tightened her chest as she opened it, half expecting dismissive skepticism. Instead, it was an invitation to meet a glimmer of hope mingled with a rush of anxiety. "Let's talk. Your findings seem promising," it read. Her heart raced. This was the confirmation she desperately needed. Yet, doubt trickled in as she considered the meeting. Would she articulate the truth with enough conviction? Would she be able to maintain her poise when confronted with powerful figures? This would be her first step into a world where stakes were much higher. "Focus on the patients," she whispered to herself, drawing fortitude from the unwavering belief that truth had the power to heal. The clock ticked unfavorably towards her appointment time, urgency blending with excitement. Before heading out, she paused by David's drawings strewn across the living room floor, each sketch a window into his vibrant imagination. Closing her eyes, she made a promise not to lose herself in her ambitions. She would recall the spontaneous laughter they shared over trivial things. The duality of her roles pressed heavily against her, but both mattered equally. Arriving at the coffee shop, the fragrant atmosphere was alive with chatter, but Sarah's attention was singular. She scanned the room for the journalist, her thoughts a mix of anticipation and a hint of dread. As the minutes passed, she could almost hear her own heartbeat, each thump amplifying her insecurity. And then he walked in, a man in a crisp blazer, projecting an aura of authority, yet with a hint of approachability. As they exchanged greetings, Sarah felt the gravity of the moment crash over her. "Let's get to the bottom of this," he said, his eyes locking onto hers, seeming to hold the weight of possibility. Sarah took a deep breath, sensing that the scale had tipped. This was her moment to be the advocate she envisioned, but as the initial layers of conversation unfolded, something in her gut tightened. The questions began to probe deeper, revealing hidden angles she hadn't prepared for, connections to larger forces as shadows in the backdrop shifted ominously. In that instant, the seemingly straightforward journey toward exposing corruption morphed into a complex web of intertwined interests. As she opened her mouth to respond, Sarah felt a resounding conviction but also the pressure of uncertainty tightening around her. Was she ready for the storm brewing just beyond the horizon? She took a breath, refocusing on her purpose, knowing that nothing would prepare her for what was about to come. But the most significant discoveries often arise from the boldest confrontations. Would she navigate this transformative moment toward her intended outcome or unravel under the scrutiny of the establishment she dared to challenge? As the conversation progressed, Sarah's heart raced. The journalist's questions cut through her thoughts like a scalpel, demanding precise answers. "How did you obtain this information?" he asked, leaning forward, his expression serious yet probing. She hesitated, internalizing his curiosity. The knowledge she gathered wasn't simply factoids, it was a mosaic of testimonies and documented discrepancies that painted a disturbing picture of her hospital's operations. Each piece felt fragile, like a delicate glass waiting to shatter under pressure. "I've spoken to many nurses, patients, and even some administrators," she replied with steadiness she didn't fully feel. "They're afraid to speak up. Fear is a powerful tool for those in charge." He scribbled notes, his gaze unwavering. "What about your position? Aren't you worried about repercussions?" The question struck a nerve, igniting a flicker of doubt in Sarah's mind. Would she endure this fight only to lose her job? The world outside this cafe seemed distant, the voices around her muffled as the stakes crystallized. But the faces of the patients she had met flashed through her mind. Their pain was real, their suffering palpable. "Yes, but I believe the truth must come out," she managed, feeling a surge of strength. Each interaction with the patients and colleagues built a web of support that kept her grounded. "People deserve to know what's happening." The journalist nodded, thoughtfulness darkening his features. "If we go public, it could lead to wider inquiries, maybe even open the floodgates." "You understand that?" Suddenly, the weight of their situation bore down on her. The implications of her collaboration could unravel everything, not just for her, but for her colleagues and the vulnerable patients she championed. If the stories got out, what would happen to those who had confided in her? Would they be targets? "So, we're not just exposing a problem," she realized aloud. "We're potentially putting people in danger." I can't bear that. His demeanor shifted slightly, scholarship mixed with caution. Your concerns are valid, but the ramifications of silence are far greater. We need courage to show the truth, even if it hurts. His words sank deep, piercing through the fog of her self-doubt and indecision. Perhaps this was the crossroads she needed, a moment where she could reshape her narrative not just as a mother, but as a protector and advocate. After a moment of contemplation, she spoke again, voice steadier than before. I want to shine a light on this, but I need a strategy to protect those involved. I cannot bear extracting the truth if it puts anyone at risk. The journalist smiled, appreciation dawning. And that's your strength, Sarah. You're thinking critically, not just emotionally. We can devise an approach to mitigate risks. It'll take planning, but it can be done. You're not alone in this fight. Encouraged, Sarah found the anxiety receding bit by bit, replaced by a burgeoning resolve. She began outlining their approach, the flowing dialogue between them shifting from fear to empowerment, allowing her instincts to guide. For every question he asked, she countered with practical considerations. Yet as they exchanged strategies, something gnawed at her, an unsettling sense that they were entering uncharted territory. What began as a quest for truth was now a tactical engagement with powerful players that overshadowed the simple acts of her past. Every decision would carve a path not just for her career but for countless others. When the meeting ended, she left the coffee shop with her thoughts racing. There was potential here, her courage igniting a flame that could illuminate shadows lurking in the halls of the hospital. But she felt the shift in the atmosphere, as if the looming challenge awaited. What would they discover about the institution she had devoted herself to? Would she find an unexpected ally or a more dangerous adversary? As Sarah stepped out into the crisp air, the realization dawned: this was only the beginning of a battle that would stretch her limits, testing not only her resolve but also her ability to protect those she cared for. And in that moment, she could sense the storm on the horizon, a tumultuous tide that promised to redefine who she was. But even as the stakes grew higher, she couldn't shake the feeling that the very act of seeking truth and justice might unleash forces she was far from prepared to confront. Would she find the strength to stand her ground, or would the pressure to maintain the status quo prove too great? In her gut, she knew the answers awaited, sprawled out in the unknown. The following days blurred into a whirlwind of emotions and preparations. Sarah dove deeper into her investigation, spending late nights poring over documents and connecting with contacts previously deemed risky. Each conversation chipped away at her anxiety, revealing the layers of truth entrenched in secrecy. But with every revelation came a weighty realization of the potential fallout. At home, she tried to maintain a facade of normalcy for her children, but the tension never fully dissipated. It lingered in her veins, curling around her thoughts, especially late at night as she wrestled between her responsibilities as a parent and her emerging role as a whistleblower. One evening, after tucking her children in, Sarah sat alone in the dim light of the kitchen, sorting through her notes. Her heart thrummed with conflicting feelings. Could she genuinely make a difference? Or was she merely setting herself up for a confrontation that would jeopardize everything she loved? The tension in her chest felt like a coil tightening, ready to snap. Suddenly, the silence of the house was pierced by her phone buzzing on the table, a message from the journalist, a simple line that struck her profoundly: "Are you ready for the next step?" The question echoed in her mind, an urgent call to action. The answer wasn't straightforward. Her readiness hinged on a delicate balance between ethics and self-preservation. Could she safeguard those whose stories she carried, while also stepping into the light herself? In the days that followed, she began engaging more actively with her network of contacts. A particularly unnerving encounter was with a nurse named Lisa, whose commitment to her patients mirrored Sarah's. But Lisa's terrors ran deeper. She spoke of witnessing breaches of protocol and the harrowing toll it took on staff morale. "Every time I speak up, I'm silenced," Lisa confessed, eyes darting as if shadows held ears. "We're all scared. But I believe in what you're doing, Sarah." Those words planted a seed of reassurance within her. But with trust came risks. That night, Sarah mulled over her conversations with Lisa and others. They relied on her to facilitate a shift. She held their hopes in the palm of her hand. A sense of responsibility weighed heavily on her, demanding she transform her emerging courage into an effective strategy. The next meeting with the journalist was crucial. Together, they began drafting a structured plan, one that included secure ways to gather testimonies without exposing her sources. Each detail reaffirmed her commitment to both truth and her colleagues' safety. With every decision, she felt her resolve solidifying into something stronger than mere instinct. Yet, as she meticulously crafted this intricate web of support, a new tension emerged. Who would she confront first? The hospital administration was notorious for its ruthlessness, known for silencing dissenters with threats or pressure. She was stepping into a minefield. That day, while reviewing plans at the cafe where they had met, Sarah felt a growing sense of urgency. There was a ticking clock in the background of her mind, a reminder that time was neither on her side nor on the side of those suffering within the hospital walls. Waiting could be detrimental, the journalist had warned. He believed speed was essential to retaining their power and leveraging the information they had gathered. But with that thought came another: was she ready for the backlash? The very act of stepping forward now felt like a tightrope walk, where a slip could mean disaster not just for her, but for everyone involved. As Sarah packed up her papers, she steeled herself for the conversation ahead. It was time to gather those whose voices echoed her own convictions and formulate a confrontation plan against the institution that jeopardized their integrity. But a bout of doubt crossed her mind: could she handle the fallout? The moment of confrontation loomed large, casting shadows over her resolve. But a deeper question gnawed at her: what if this step ignited forces she had not foreseen? The answer to this question remained elusive, mingled within the uncertainty that lay ahead, shrouded in the darkness of uncharted territory. Would Sarah find the strength to lead the charge, or would she falter against the invisible currents of power? Tomorrow, she would meet with Lisa again, a stepping stone toward an inevitable reckoning. But the stakes were clear: this was but the beginning of a tumultuous battle ahead, one where the truth was the prize and the cost could be steep. As Sarah paced her living room the next morning, the weight of her impending meeting settled in her stomach like a stone. The sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air, but its brightness felt stark against the gloom of her worries. How could she navigate this treacherous path without endangering her children's future? She poured herself a cup of coffee, the simple ritual offering a fleeting pause from the chaos of thoughts racing in her mind. Each sip grounded her momentarily, but the flavor quickly faded, rendering her anxiety sharper. What if she faltered? What if confronting the administration only intensified the fear gripping the hospital staff? Yet she couldn't deny the surge of determination bubbling within, igniting her resolve. This was no longer solely about her. This was for every nurse, every patient, every person suffering in silence. A sense of purpose encased her fears, transforming them into an awareness that drove her forward. When Sarah arrived at the cafe, she found Lisa already seated, her fingers anxiously tapping a napkin. The nurse's face betrayed a mix of excitement and dread, and Sarah could see the toll this fight was taking on her friend. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, settling into the chair opposite Lisa. The smell of freshly baked pastries surrounded them, conspiring to lift the heavy atmosphere. "I know it's a lot to ask, but we need to strategize." Lisa nodded, her determination rising to meet Sarah's. "I spoke to a few colleagues last night. They want to join us but are afraid of the repercussions. It's a fine line we're walking." Her voice quivered slightly, reflecting the gravity of their situation. "The truth is a powerful tool," Sarah affirmed, feeling a rush of both confidence and trepidation. "We just have to channel it effectively. I'm counting on your input to substantiate our claims." As they detailed their plan, mapping out each individual's contribution, Sarah felt fragments of her earlier doubts dissolving into clarity. She realized that she possessed a hidden talent for organizing chaos, a skill she had honed throughout her career in nursing. Each time she put pen to paper, the outline of their mission became less nebulous and more tangible. They were not merely seeking truth, they were crafting a narrative that could awaken the community and inspire others to join their cause. "I don't want to be naive," Lisa interjected. "This could blow back on us in ways we can't imagine." "If we're too loud, I understand your fears," Sarah interrupted gently. "But we have to be loud. If the administration knows we're united, it gives us strength. Together, we can withstand the pushback." A flicker of hope ignited in Lisa's eyes. "You're right. But what about protection for the whistleblowers? We can't risk our jobs." The thought of safeguarding her colleagues propelled Sarah's thoughts into new complexities. They were in a precarious position, and she had to ensure their voices could rise without jeopardizing their livelihoods. "I'll arrange for secure methods to communicate," she declared, tapping her finger on the table decisively. "We can create aliases, use secure messages. Nothing is foolproof, but we can make it harder for them to detect our moves." As the meeting unfolded, Sarah's resolve only deepened. Confronting the powers that had historically silenced dissenters became not just a possibility but a responsibility she was willing to shoulder. The notion of risk initially paralyzed her, but it now fueled her ambition. By the time they parted, Sarah felt the electricity of purpose coursing through her veins. But with this surge of energy came an unsettling realization: she had attracted not just allies but also a litany of adversities. Would she be able to manage this newfound power and the potential chaos that surrounded it? Soon she would have to confront that reality. Outside the cafe, the world buzzed with a false normalcy, people living without knowledge of the storm brewing within their healthcare system. But Sarah knew what awaited and felt her heartbeat synchronize with the ticking clock urging her onward. Tomorrow, they would present their gathered testimonies to those in power, but the question echoed louder in her mind: were they ready to bear the burden of truth? The whispers of doubt were far from silenced, ebbing in and out as she approached the line of no return. The reckoning would soon be at hand. The morning light seemed almost mocking as Sarah rose from her restless night. It was just a few hours since she had left the cafe, and the realities of what lay ahead crashed against her like waves against a jagged shore. She sighed deeply, her breath released a mix of anxiety and determination. Today would demand every ounce of her energy, her courage, and, most importantly, her resolve. As she showered, the steam wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, yet the pressure weighed heavily on her chest. Each drop of water that cascaded down attempted to wash away her doubts. She studied her reflection in the mirror, studying the shadows under her eyes and the furrow etched into her brow. She was no longer just a nurse, she was a whistleblower, an insurgent in a system that rewarded silence over truth. This duality sparked a flicker of fear within her. What if this new identity shattered the foundations of who she had spent years becoming? She dressed methodically, choosing professional clothes that felt a touch heavier than usual, a reminder of both her purpose and the risks involved. Standing tall, she looked again in the mirror, whispering a silent affirmation. She would not be defined by fear. She would not waver. At the hospital, the familiar sense of antiseptic and sterile instruments overwhelmed her. The day felt charged, thick with unsaid words and unasked questions. Nurses moved hurriedly past her, shadows of the talented individuals they were, each one harboring their own fears or ambitions. Sarah noticed the slight hesitations in their movements, the averted eyes. In that moment, she understood they were watching her vicariously, living through her courage, questioning their own willingness to speak out. The meeting room was cloaked in a fog of uncertainty. As Sarah entered, she glanced around at her colleagues who had pledged their support. The gravity of their commitments settled heavily in the air. Lisa offered her an encouraging smile, though she sensed the nervous energy radiating from the group. "All right, everyone, let us go over our points again," Sarah instructed, her voice steady yet firm. Each word felt like a small victory against the rising tide of fear. Together, they recapitulated their evidence, refining their arguments, fortifying their courage against potential rebuke. This was more than just the sharing of facts, it was an assertion of their collective strength, their refusal to remain silent any longer. As they strategized, Sarah became acutely aware of her leadership roles, both as an instigator of change and a custodian of her team's vulnerabilities. Moments of clarity struck, she excelled not merely in organization but also in nurturing the voices that were often drowned out. She didn't just see her colleagues, they were mothers, fathers, friends, and advocates for the patients they served. This was their fight as much as it was hers. After rehearsing their testimony, Sarah watched as they prepared to leave the room. She felt the anxious gaze of her peers as they looked to her for guidance. Their uncertainty mirrored her own. "Just remember," she reminded them, "we're here for each other. Our truth matters." A profound silence followed, and something inside her clicked, a recognition of her growing resolve despite the unsettling stakes. As they approached the administration office, the tension seeped into her muscles, yet a sense of purpose propelled her forward. The acknowledgement of her own capability to lead further fueled her ambition. But even as they closed in on the confrontation, a sliver of doubt crept in. Would they truly be ready to stand as one? Would her voice carry enough weight? Together, they stood at the precipice of change, preparing to face authority. The moment loomed over them, charged with a mixture of dread and tantalizing promise. Sarah inhaled deeply, blood pounding in her ears. Instinctively, she reached for Lisa's hand, and in that quiet act of solidarity, she found both reassurance and strength. As the door loomed in front, the chilling realization struck her: they had come this far, but the battle wasn't just against the administration. It was a battle against their own fears, against the instinct to retreat into silence. She would need to wield her truth skillfully, for the challenges ahead would test not only her resolve but her very understanding of justice. The door swung open, and everything shifted. The time had come to confront not just authority, but the deeper truth of their being. As they stepped inside, the weight of accountability settled firmly on Sarah's shoulders. Resolute, she stepped forward into the unknown, understanding that this was just the beginning of a battle that could alter the very fabric of their lives. How far would she be willing to go to unearth the reality buried beneath layers of deception? A cold, artificial light filled the administration office, amplifying the tension that hung heavy in the air. The white walls seemed to close in on them as they took their places, a small cluster of passionate individuals amid a sea of stark professionalism. Sarah's heart raced with each second that passed, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. She couldn't shake the feeling that, while they had gathered as a united front, the real battle was just about to begin. The administrator, Mr. Langston, entered. His stern expression held the promise of scrutiny, a man accustomed to silence and compliance. He barely looked at them, shuffling through papers on the table like he was preparing for a mundane meeting rather than a confrontation that could potentially shake the very foundation of their institution. "Let us make this quick," he said, glancing up from the bureaucracy. "I've been informed that there are concerns regarding protocol violations. I'd like to hear your statements." The words dripped with condescension. Sarah felt a swell of anger rising in her chest, but she swallowed hard, resisting the impulse to charge in headfirst. It was now or never. She had spent the entire night rehearsing, preparing herself for this moment. Yet, as she opened her mouth to speak, doubt curled around her thoughts like smoke. "Mr. Langston, we're here to address several critical issues regarding patient safety," she began, her voice firm but wavering slightly. She glanced at her colleagues, catching a glimpse of Lisa's encouraging nod, which rekindled the flame of courage within her. As Sarah detailed the incident's unreported medication errors, unsafe staffing ratios, the silent anguish of patients left unheard, she could see Langston's expression shift, barely masking his irritation. The other members of her team reinforced her points, words blending into a symphony of resolve. The level of fear surrounding them was palpable, yet somehow, it felt lighter. Each shared experience chiseling away at the oppressive weight of isolation. The tension in the room thickened as Langston interrupted abruptly. "You grasp what you're suggesting, don't you? This isn't a game. Accusations like this could end careers, ruin lives." A chill of reality washed over Sarah. The stakes had always been high, but hearing it articulated in that cold tone unleashed a deeper anxiety. What did it mean to sacrifice for a greater good? Would she truly risk everything she had built? What if, in her quest for transparency, she unintentionally inflicted pain on those she had fought so hard to defend? "Lives are already at risk," Sarah countered, her voice gaining strength. "The lives of our patients depend on us. Ignoring these issues doesn't just sweep them under the rug. It endangers their lives. We need accountability, not just for them, but for us as caregivers." Langston's scoffing laugh echoed back at her. "Idealism is charming, but this isn't about idealism. This is about facts, data. You think passion can substitute for hard evidence?" An unanticipated surge of determination washed over her. With every ounce of resolve, she leaned in. "The evidence is all around you. We are the data, the experiences of countless patients who walk through the doors of this hospital trusting us with their lives. So, yes, we are here for accountability, but more so, we are here for the truth. Sarah felt a shift within herself as she spoke, a lightning bolt of clarity that cut through her previous doubts. Each word she articulated was a reclamation of her power. This wasn't merely about the facts they presented, it was about her role in challenging the very system that had held them captive with threats of repercussions. As silence fell over the room, reverberating with the weight of what her words implied, Sarah realized something crucial. She was no longer just a nurse or a whistleblower, she was turning into an advocate. An embodiment of truth demanding to be recognized in a world built on compliance. But as she looked around at her colleagues' determined faces, pride blossomed in her heart. Only to be tinged with fear. Would they, too, face the repercussions of this confrontation? Would the very act of standing together lead to their undoing? The moment crystallized, tension coiling tightly around them. Sarah felt the gravity of the situation tighten her chest as she awaited Langston's response, knowing that whatever he said next would not only determine their fates but would reshape her understanding of courage and sacrifice forever. If they were going to emerge from this battle with their integrity intact, they would need to prepare for the backlash. The real question hung in the air like a storm cloud: how deeply were they willing to dig into their reserves of strength, and what would they uncover about themselves in the process? The tension surged in the room like a tide, and Sarah's heart raced as she caught a glimpse of Langston's calculating stare. His lips curled into a mock smugness, and she braced herself for the anticipated dismissal, his condescending rebuttal that had become all too familiar in these halls. "You've made your statement, Sarah," he drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But do you believe your passion can overshadow our institutional policies? Think carefully. Nothing you say today will change our directives without concrete substantiation." Each word felt like a punch to her gut. She had pinpointed their concerns so carefully, and yet here he stood, erecting barriers with an ease that made her feel small. Her colleagues appeared equally crestfallen, their hopes of achieving change deflating beneath his oppressive authority. In that moment, Sarah's gaze fell to the table, but amidst the fog of disappointment, a spark ignited within her. This was not merely about winning an argument, it was about justice for those patients who had yet to be seen or heard. Could she flip the narrative, drawing from her pain and resolve? "How many lives have you witnessed come and go merely because we lacked proper oversight?" she challenged, her voice a fierce whisper. "How many families have gone home unknowing of the errors performed here? With the spotlight on us, we cannot ignore the suffering or the responsibility to speak on their behalf." Langston's eyes hardened, and Sarah felt the unease beneath her skin. She was skirting the edge of insubordination. But a newfound determination coursed through her, and she leaned in, all fear momentarily forgotten. A small voice in her head shouted to stay safe, stay quiet, but the louder roar of her convictions drowned it out. "Please, think about what you're really saying," she pressed. "It's no longer just protocols we're discussing, we're talking about people, actual human beings who deserve our utmost care and protection. If we let this moment slip away, we sentence them to an indefinable fate, and for what? To protect a fragile ego?" The silence that enveloped her words felt electric. She could feel the weight of their collective gazes, their shared anxiety, their unity, all pushing her to expand this newfound stance. "I know that our paths forward may seem tumultuous," she admitted, letting the vulnerability in her voice linger. "But finding the courage to stand for true care is essential. We need to recalibrate what we value as a medical community. It's not just compliance. It is our duty, and it begins with accountability." Langston's surprise momentarily cracked his stoic demeanor, allowing Sarah to reclaim the conversation. She could sense it, the embers of resistance igniting in their midst. "We are nurses, Mr. Langston. We are not just here to follow orders, we are here to uphold lives. If this institution wants to prioritize our patients, we need to be the ones to hold it accountable, even if it means facing the consequences ourselves. I can't stand idly by. Not anymore." Her colleagues exchanged glances filled with uncertainty, but Sarah held her ground, contemplating what her next difficult move might require. The stakes felt higher than ever, and she was awakening to her deeper purpose. Perhaps Langston wasn't the only obstacle she had to overcome. she must also confront her own fears and apprehensions that had kept her from stepping into her role as an advocate. As the silence loomed, she could feel the weight of her colleagues' decision pressing in around her. Would they rally with her or recoil back into the shadows? When Langston finally responded, his voice was laced with a cool, calculating edge that struck a chord of trepidation in her gut. "I hope you are prepared for the repercussions of such rhetoric, Sarah. You may find that the truth you seek to expose will not only dismantle institutional walls but may also isolate those who dare to support you." The gravity of his words hung in the air, heavy with consequences. The moment hung in balance, and Sarah realized that she was standing not just for herself but for everyone who felt powerless under the weight of institutional silence. As she stared back at Langston, a revelation crashed upon her: she had to act, and there was no turning back. The flame of her conviction burned intensely, demanding that she plan her next steps carefully. Against the backdrop of this confrontation, something profound was crystallizing within her, forging a hardened resolve she never knew existed. But just as she opened her mouth to respond, a thought struck her: what if their investigation went further and unmasked truths hidden deeper than safety protocols? What terrifying discoveries lurked beneath the polished exterior of their institution? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, igniting a new vital sense of urgency. With all eyes on her, Sarah prepared to seize the moment. The time was near to expose not just the misconduct but the buried secrets that had been collecting dust for too long. As Sarah stood in the silence following Langston's pointed warning, a new sense of clarity enveloped her. This moment was not merely about divulging discrepancies within the hospital, it was the genesis of a moral revolution in her heart, a pledge to those vulnerable patients whose voices had yet to be heard. Langston's cold demeanor wasn't just a barrier, it was a catalyst. Sarah straightened, summoning the strength that had bloomed within her throughout this arduous journey. The time for half measures was over. The stakes were monumental not just for her and her colleagues, but for the integrity of the healthcare profession itself. "I understand the risks, Mr. Langston," Sarah articulated, her voice fierce yet controlled. "But the ramifications of our silence are far greater than any consequences you could impose. If we are serious about patient welfare, accountability must be non-negotiable. We are here not just to ask for change, we are demanding it." A ripple of solidarity swept through her colleagues in that charged room, their eyes brightening as they witnessed her transformation. Like a rising tide, courage spread amongst them, pushing the boundaries of their fear and uncertainty. Lisa leaned forward, her expression a mixture of awe and resolve, a subtle affirmation of their shared commitment. Langston's expression momentarily faltered, betraying a crack in his stoic facade. "You may have support now," he scoffed, knitting his fingers together, "but know that speaking out is a slippery slope. You will be met with resistance from many who view this as a threat. Your colleagues will question which side you stand on. You'll find that solidarity can be a mighty shield," Sarah countered, emboldened by the growing silence among her peers. "Many of us are already questioning where our values lie. We cannot continue to blindly follow directives that endanger lives. This isn't just about compliance, it's about standing up for what's right, and we are willing to face the consequences together." The room fell silent, yet the energy among her colleagues shifted palpably. Sarah dared to meet Langston's eyes, planting each word like seeds of an insurrection. The tension transformed into something almost electric, a defining moment of revelation not just for her, but for everyone present. "Are you prepared to uncover the truth?" she pressed, "not just for our benefit but for those who have been silenced? We could be the voice for the voiceless." Her pulse quickened as she thought of her patients, their struggles echoed in her heart, each word forged in unyielding resolve. Langston's expression hardened briefly before he controlled it once more. "Be cautious, the world you're stepping into is perilous, and the truth is subjective. You will find that it comes with a price you may not be ready to pay." "We are ready to pay whatever price it takes," Sarah asserted, her heart racing with conviction. "This is bigger than any single person. It encompasses the very essence of our profession, and it starts with us being brave enough to challenge established norms." Finally, something shifted within Langston's icy demeanor. Perhaps it was the prospect of resistance that unnerved him, perhaps he could feel the defiance growing in the room. With a stoic exhale, he reached for his pen and commenced scribbling notes, a tacit acknowledgement of their stand. This was a breakthrough for Sarah, it signified the collective shift from complacency to awakening. Just months ago, she had felt adrift, weighed down by doubt. Now, she was visionary, standing on the precipice of true transformation. As they concluded their meeting, Sarah felt an undeniable empowerment surge through her, as if each fear was cast aside in favor of an exhilarating sense of purpose. She and her colleagues had embarked on an uncharted journey, one that would usher in accountability as a cornerstone of their practice. Words had catalyzed change, not merely for herself but for everyone she had inspired to lift their voices alongside hers. Walking outside, she felt the invigorating fresh air wash over her, reminiscent of the storm that had raged within. She glanced over at her colleagues, each one illuminated with pride and purpose. They had chosen authenticity over silence, empowerment over passivity. With every step forward, Sarah felt an unshakable conviction strengthen inside her. As she returned home that evening, David ran to her, with paint-smeared hands and flourishes of creativity spilling out of his sketches. The smiles shared between them encapsulated the joy she had almost forgotten in her pursuit of justice. In that moment, she realized the true measure of her growth. She had balanced her fight for patient's safety and integrity with her role as a mother. It was time to embrace both facets of her reality, intertwining her passion for advocacy with her love for her son. Sarah had conquered her fears and shattered the chains of complacency that had previously bound her. She understood now that truly owning her narrative meant facing discomfort and danger head-on. In the quiet moments, she knew she would continue to rise unwavering, resolute, and ready to advocate for all those who had once felt unseen. The path ahead might be fraught with challenges, but she was prepared to navigate it with newfound strength both as a nurse and as a mother. This was the beginning of her journey into the light, and she stepped boldly towards it with unyielding conviction. Now, it's your turn. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help uplift these important narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey. What inspires you? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness stories of personal overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to support this channel. Only true fans understand the importance of spreading these powerful messages.